When the shadows of evil forces begin to dominate the existence of humans, when evil spirits step out of the shadows and start chasing mortals, when the gates of heaven starts to open gradually and she starts to walk on the earth once again. She that is dark. Biju spoke again, and tonight it's Tikali's night after all. Ravi wanted to silence him again, but his curiosity was piqued. What it is? My grandmother says that on this night, the witches wandering in the hills grow more powerful. Even people don't dare to step out of their house out of fear. In our place, bushes are placed in front of the door so that the witches cannot enter. But still, they knock on the door, hoping someone mistakenly open them so that they can come inside. Biju had just said this much when Rishu, while removing his cricket kit, said, "Are they witches or salesgirl knocking on the door?"
"Here, look at this soap launched by our company in this market. And yes, there's a special offer for Dagali night."
Hearing Rishu's word, Ravi bursted out of laughing. Biju slightly felt angry and pointing towards that old house, saying, "Oh, you're having a lot of fun, huh? See that house? If you go inside it once, you will realize everything. This jesting of yours will vanish." Rishu and Ravi looked at that old house closely. It really was scary. It was an old, dilapidated house with moss-covered walls and wild plants had grown in the cracks. "Oh, come on, there's no such thing as that. Biju has just a habit of telling made-up stories," Rishu said, moving ahead, and Ravi followed him. Biju remained standing there and called out from behind, "Wanna bet?" Ravi and Rishu stopped. "I can challenge anyone. The locals here will tell you." "What's there to ask?" Rishu said, coming towards Biju. "Ask about what? I'll go inside and come back, and then you'll give me 500. That's what's called a bet. Tell me, will you bet or not?" Fear was evident on the faces of Biju and Ravi. Before they could say anything, Rishu handed Ravi the cricket kit and snatched the torch from Biju's hand, heading towards that dilapidated house. "Wait, listen, Rishu! Leave it, man!" Ravi and Biju shouted after him. But Rishu didn't want to hear anything. Wearing a white tracksuit, Rishu held the torch in his hand and reached the door of that spooky old house. It was a dilapidated house, seemingly decades old. Its hut-like roof had wooden work, the wild vines hanging from it. Its windows and doors seemed not to have opened in years. The old wooden doors had carvings of figures that were half animal and half human. Rishu pushed the door. With a crackling sound, the door opened, and he entered a large dim room. It was an old room with dry leaves scattered on the floor. Rishu was surprised. How could there be leaves in the closed room? The walls were adorned with large portraits of old people, covered in countless webs. As he moved forward, he found a courtyard. He noticed that the floor of the room had roots of an old tree breaking through it. In torchlight, all he could see on the floor were leaves. The walls were damp, the windows dusty. The room's loft was home to countless bats. Rishu was looking at the terrified scene when suddenly he felt a cold, ice hand scratching his body. Slowly. Terrified Rishu turned around quickly and, "Who's there?" he shouted. But no one was there. Rishu took a deep breath. He had taken just few steps forward when suddenly the house door slammed shut behind him. Alarmed, he turned and ran towards the door, but his foot got caught somewhere and he fell to the ground. The door to the outside was now closed. His breath grew heavy, his body began to shiver. Falling down, the torch slipped from his hand and rolled away in a corner. The light of the torch scattered on the wall, and Rishu saw a shadow emerging on it. Rishu screamed. Darkness covered his vision, and he realized he was not alone in that house. Rishu! Suddenly, he felt a fiery breath, close, very close to his ears. His body started shaking. He wanted to scream, but his voice was stuck in his throat. Sweat dripped from his forehead due to the terror. Somehow he picked himself up from the ground and dashed towards the torch. Grabbing the torch, he shone it around the room, but there was no one there. The door of the house was closed, and out of fear, his mind stopped working. But then from a corner, he heard something like a hoot of an owl. He swung his torch around and saw in the middle of the courtyard an old, withered tree. The sound was coming from there. Rishu was very scared, but now he was also amazed at the sight of the tree. The tree was completely dry and withered, but the apples hanging on it were a deep crimson red. When Rishu showed his torch on the tree, he saw two owls sitting on the highest branch, staring at him with their big eyes. Rishu's anxiety kept increasing. Where had I ended up? He regretted trying to act brave in front of his friends. But then he heard a sound of footsteps. A shiver ran through his body like a needle piercing him. He pointed his torch in that direction, and there an old woman walking with a stick was coming towards him. Rishu's whole body began to shake. His face turned pale. His lips dried up, and his hand and feet started tingling. He wanted to run, but his legs was frozen in place. The woman appeared to be around 18-90 years old, with a hunched back, deep wrinkles on her face, wearing a mountain vest and a scarf. She approached him, holding out the same red apple, and said,
Take it, son.
For a few seconds, Rishu stood there like a statue, unable to say anything. When she repeated,
Take it, son.
he slightly took the red apple and put it in his backpack. Seeing him taking the apple, the old woman became so happy that her evil laugh echoed through the ruins. Where is the way out? He asked in a dry, shaking voice. The old woman gestured for him to follow her. Hesitantly, Rishu followed behind her. They had walked only few steps when the light from his torch fell on the old woman's feet ahead of him. They were not normal. They were backward. Rishu's legs started to flatten. He stopped. The old woman also stopped and started laughing like a little girl. Rishu now felt that he won't survive. He screamed at the top of his lungs, "Ravi! Biju!" Stumbling, falling and struggling, Rishu ran towards the door. But a voice still seemed to be following him, calling, "Rishu! Rishu! Rishu!" As he reached the door, it opened on its own. He saw Ravi and Biju standing in front of him. Seeing them, he felt a wave of relief was washed over him, and his head spun. He collapsed unconscious on the doorstep. Being brave is one thing, but trying to act fearless in the faces of supernatural mysteries, something that mankind has never understood, is sheer foolishness. Even by the time when he reached home, Rishu couldn't shake off the incident. Everything that had happened just hours earlier felt like a dream where you struggle but still can't wake up. It felt like sleep paralysis. When he reached home in the darkness, his dazed expression caught the attention of his mother, whom he called Amma. She asked,
What's wrong, Raju? Why is your face so red? What happened?
Amma, who was pregnant, slowly began to descend the threshold of the courtyard. Rishu was scared, but knew that if he told his mother what has happened in the evening, she would scold him. She always forbade him from wandering in the dark areas. Nothing happened, just tired. I'll rest a bit, then eat, Rishu replied, and coming close to his mother, touched her belly and said, "You both also rest." His mother smiled and said, "I still have work in the kitchen. Your father is returning from the city tomorrow, and I have to make something special for him." Later, lying on the soft bed in his room, Rishu kept recalling everything that wouldn't leave his mind. He tried to distract himself, but the image of that old lady, those two owls, and that apple tree kept coming back to his mind repeatedly. Turning over and placing his hand on his head, he tried to sleep forcibly. It was only 2 minutes would have passed when Rishu felt something crawling on his neck. Perhaps an insect. He brushed his hand over his neck, but found nothing. He tried to sleep again. But suddenly, Rishu sat up and started shaking his head and putting a finger in his ear. It felt as if the insect had entered his ear and was going deeper and deeper. It sounds like a buzzing of bees. Now it was heading to his brain, digging tunnels and gnawing. Rishu began to struggle. He took a long, deep breath and buried his head into the pillows. His heart was pounding. After a little while, he came to the kitchen. Amma was sitting by the stove, making something. After a while, she got up and left the kitchen. When she returned, she bought a plate of sliced apple pieces. I found this in your bag. Here, eat it, she said. Rishu stood still. He remembered that the apple given by old hag was still in his bag. Amma, didn't you eat it? Did you? Amma! Amma! He said in a panic. Yes, I ate a piece, she replied. Why? What happened? Rishu held his head and mumbled, You shouldn't have eaten it, Amma, you shouldn't. That night was the last peaceful night for Rishu and his family, because what was about to happen was beyond human comprehensions. The shadow of dark has entered the house. At midnight, a laughter broke Rishu's sleep. Worried about Amma, he slowly went to the veranda. What he saw there in the dim light of the lamp made the ground slip under his feet. Amma was sitting in the veranda, laughing loudly, exactly like that old hag. After that night, Rishu's Amma changed completely. She started walking in a strange, humped manner, like an 80 years old woman, slowly turning her head, neither speaking nor responding, just sitting on the dark floor of the veranda. Amma? Amma? Rishu said, placing his hand on her shoulder from behind. Amma? What happened? Why are you sitting here? Amma was sitting on the ground, rocking back and forth. The flickering flames of the lamp in the courtyard shone faintly. Amma neither opened her mouth nor said anything. She just kept staring at Rishu with her lifeless eyes, without blinking. Tear welled up in Rishu's eyes. Seeing his mother like this, how could she change so suddenly? Her eyes looked hollow, as if some incurable disease had gripped her. Amma, get up! He tried unsuccessfully to lift her, then noticed that she was gently stroking her belly. Amma, get up! There is Gudiya in your belly. At least eat something for her. Amma finally spoke this time, saying, Gudiya? And then turning her head to stare into Rishu's eyes, saying, whispered, I ate your Gudiya. Rishu stumbled back in shock. His ear deaf, his entire body was trembling as if a cold, dead body was warped itself around him, draining all his warmth. In the dim light of flickering lamps, Amma's face in the veranda seemed sinister. She was now smiling, making strange gestures with her hands, and repeatedly shouting, I ate your Gudiya. I ate your Gudiya. Seeing Amma's red eyes, Rishu terrified to his core. There was no one in the house to help him. When Amma turned towards him, Rishu panicked. She placed one hand on her belly and extended the other towards Rishu. He quickly ran to his room and locked the door, gasping for breath. He kept regretting again and again that he shouldn't have entered that haunted house. But now it was too late. Rishu was safe in his room, but he was also worried about Amma. He peeked out through the bars of the window, moving the curtain side. Amma was climbing the stairs to the roof, holding her belly and walking slowly. Rishu felt anxious, even though he was scared. But Rishu loved his Amma. Finally, he opened the door. Amma? Amma! He called out, running towards the roof. When he reached the top, he saw Amma sitting in a corner of the roof in moonlight. Amma's face and hand were stained with blood. She turned and smiled upon seeing Rishu. Rishu took 2 steps back, and then Amma, holding the blood-soaked body of a cat in her hand, extended towards Rishu and asked, "Will you eat?" Rishu fainted right there. The moon of the night was still playing hide and seek with the clouds. When Rishu regained consciousness, he found himself lying on his bed. He couldn't understand whether he had been dreaming or if his eyes had truly opened. He looked around and saw Amma sitting at the edge of his bed, looking at him with great affection. She seemed very calm. Rishu panicked and started looking around everywhere. Was it all dream? Or the ghost, spirit, or whatever it was had came out of Amma? Rishu was trying to make sense out of it. But whatever it was, seeing Amma so calm gave him some relief. Thank God. Amma, do you know that I just saw you? What? He was about to speak when Amma stood up and began to walk away. He stopped mid-sentence. Amma left the room. He called out to her, but Amma ignored him. He got up from the bed and ran towards Amma. The courtyard lamp had gone out. Only the moonlight remained. "Amma!" he called as he reached the courtyard, and what he saw left him stunned. In the middle of the courtyard, the same apple tree has grown. The one that he had seen in the old woman's house. The tree with the same deep red apples. Then suddenly, 2 owls came and sat on the branches of the tree. While Rishu was still looking at the tree, he caught a scent. He carefully looked towards the kitchen window and saw Amma inside. She was smiling as she poured kerosene on herself with one hand and the other on her belly, humming something like a lorry. "Amma, stop!" he shouted, running towards the kitchen. His heart felt as if it would leap out of his chest, and his voice choked. The kitchen door was locked. In no time, Amma caught fire before his eyes, humming as she burned. Her hair was blazed and her skin was scorched, but she kept humming. Rishu screamed loudly and found himself back on his bed. He was breathing heavily.
Rishu, son, what happened? Did you had a bad dream?
His grandfather was sitting beside him, stroking his head. He told Rishu that they had returned home during the night and had found him unconscious on the terrace. Rishu peeked out of his window and saw Amma sleeping in her room. Wiping the sweat from his palm, he let out a sign of relief. But he also remembered that his friend Biju had told him that the witches of dark blurs the line between dream and reality. So, was it possible that everything he was repeatedly seeing in his dream was not a dream but truth? Rishu was terrified and confused at the same time. He didn't know what to do and what not to do. It was almost 6 a.m. The sound of aarti and bells was coming from nearby temple. Rishu stepped out of his room quickly. Amma's room door was closed. He felt like checking on her once, but then, thinking of something, he moved ahead. Rishu left the house and went to meet his friend Biju. Only he could save him from this maze. Early in the morning, Biju and Rishu, along with their other friends, would gather at the cricket ground. Rishu headed in that direction. "Hey Rishu, are you okay?" Biju asked as he ran up to him at the cricket ground. "Yaar..." Rishu began to speak, but his throat choked. Biju sat behind him. "Yaar, you were right. I shouldn't have gone to that house. Strange, creepy things are happening at my home. Amma has completely changed, and I can't figure out what's real and what's dream. I told you yaar not to go there," Biju said. "Didn't I warn you that the witches of dark trap people by blurring the lines between dream and reality? They deceive you and control you. You don't even realize what is real and what is fake. But now what? What should I do?" Rishu asked restlessly. "There is no solution, my friend. But your grandfather has returned from the city, right? Tell him everything. Maybe he can do something." Rishu kept thinking the entire way home about how his grandfather would dismiss the entire incident as a scary story. Convincing him would be tough, but the task had to be done now. When Rishu reached home, he found the door locked. "Where could Baba and Amma go so early in the morning?" he muttered. Looking around, suddenly a thought struck him, and his hand and feet turned cold with fear. He ran and climbed inside a window at the back. Once inside, he began to search the entire house for Amma. "Amma! Amma!" he shouted as he reached the terrace and froze. Amma was standing barefoot at the edge, her hair untied, her arms were outstretched, and she was staring at the ground below. Rishu tried to approach her quietly without making a sound,
Oh, my dear prince has come.
Amma said without turning, then turned around and smiled. Rishu's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't bear to see her Amma in such state. He steadied himself and slowly tried to approach her, try to distract her with his word. Amma, let's go to the kitchen. I'm very hungry. Please make me something. Please come on. Let's go down. Amma, hold my hand. But Amma ran her hand over her belly one last time and looked at her Rishu with sad eyes and said, "Goodbye, my son." Amma had jumped off the roof. Rishu stood frozen, staring with wide eyes at Amma's lifeless body lying on the ground below. Once again, that old withered apple tree was visible in the courtyard. A river of blood flowing from Amma's body streamed towards the roots of that tree. But this time, on the branches of that tree, there were not two, but 3 owls were there. So that was it for now, folks. The tale is done. We will meet again with new stories and fun, with new twists, new turns, and characters in fashion. So stay tuned right here at MythMansion.